Following the hugely successful first few years of the Star Wars toy line, Kenner eagerly anticipated the release of the next film in the series, The Empire Strikes Back. Unlike their first crack at the franchise, where the company struggled to get action figures into toy stores until a full year after the movie's premiere, Kenner had a brand new lineup of action figures all ready to go when the sequel debuted in 1980. And in this video we'll be covering every single Empire Strikes Back action figure produced, whilst also featuring all the major figure variations. The action figures of The Empire Strikes Back are some of my favourites in the toy line, not only because they're based on the best movie in the original trilogy, but because this is when Kenner really began to hit their stride in terms of quality. They learnt a lot from their experience developing the first 21 Star Wars action figures, with the Empire line benefiting from their ever-improving sculpting and design skills. The new movie would also feature several new environments, which in turn gave Kenner the opportunity to produce the hero action figures in all new costumes, whilst also introducing many new characters. So join me as we take a look back at the action figures of The Empire Strikes Back. Stay tuned.
Come with me, toy fans.
In 1979, Kenner began designing the next round of Star Wars action figures, based off of the new sequel movie. Yet before they did so, they first needed to choose which characters to include in the 1980 wave, and there were only 10 spots available.
General, prepare your troops for a surface attack.
Yes, my lord.
Naturally, children would want new versions of the three main heroes, so Kenner gave slots to Luke, Han and Leia, even though the characters are each outfitted for adventures on different planets. The next two entries were filled by new army builders, with one for the Rebels and one for the Empire, and Kenner gave another 2 positions to a couple of bounty hunters. Rounding out the first wave of 10 action figures, we also got 2 new characters from Cloud City, and finally, a new droid. This was a solid, if somewhat frustrating assortment of action figures for the first wave of Empire Strikes Back toys. The baffling part was that due to the scene-specific costumes for the 3 heroes, they didn't fit in well together, and the fact that other more important characters were missing from the wave entirely, but more on that later. Luke Skywalker in Bespin fatigues is one of the first figures in the line to be issued with 2 weapon accessories, and thankfully by 1980, Kenner had done away with the concept of moulding the lightsaber hilt into Luke's hand, and having the blade extend out through a slot in his arm. They instead produced a brand new lightsaber accessory for him to hold, yet once again they manufactured the weapon in yellow plastic.
No, it's not true. That's impossible!
Ever since childhood, this has been my favourite figure in the entire line, because it represents the way our hero looked in the most pivotal scenes of the original trilogy. The figure is also available in a multitude of different hair colours. I don't have them all yet, but I'm working on it.
Right.
The new version of Han Solo gave us our first chance to play with one of the heroes wearing an outfit from the ice planet Hoth, although Kenner chose to give Hoth Han a blue jacket instead of the dark brown one that he wore in the film. Seriously, between yellow lightsabers and blue parkas, I'm starting to think that there might have been a designer at Kenner that was colourblind. One of the neatest aspects of this figure is the sculpted holster on Han's right leg, that has a loop at the top. I don't know if Kenner intentionally included this so that we could holster his blaster pistol, but that's what every kid on my street did.
All right, don't lose your temper. I'll come right back and give you a hand.
For the first Empire version of Princess Leia, Kenner opted to go with her Bespin evening wear look. This figure comes with a vinyl cape that features a tampo printed pattern, and she came with that pesky Leia blaster that is always missing these days. A gold hand-painted trim adorns her gown, and this beautiful example was kindly gifted to me by my dear friend Michael French, host of the excellent YouTube channel Retrospective. As you can see, this figure has that gold trim painted around her collar, right next to her flesh-coloured neck. But there is a variation of this character with an unpainted neck section that collectors today refer to as Turtleneck Leia.
Oh, what a mess.
The 2 new Army Builder figures were both very welcome additions to our collections. The Snowtroopers in Hoth battle gear were an incredible evolution of the already beloved Imperial Stormtrooper characters, and the sculpting of this figure is terrific. The Snowtrooper comes with a vinyl cape accessory, yet unlike the other vinyl capes in the line, this one isn't worn over the shoulders. It is instead worn like a skirt, and it attaches to the figure via small hooks situated on either side of the waist.
Imperial troops have entered the base.
The Snowtrooper also comes with a newly tooled laser rifle, and while I welcomed the addition of a new blaster in the line, I never understood why Kenner gave this bulky weapon to the figure, because he couldn't hold both handles, and because the troopers seen in the movie all carry the same blasters as the ones used by the stormtroopers in the first film. So why not just give this action figure the same accessory, since they already had the tooling for it? Well, perhaps Kenner were trying to keep things fresh by offering new accessories with these action figures. Yet there is evidence to suggest that the Stormtrooper in Hoth battle gear was, at one point, going to come with the original Imperial blaster, as this promotional image shows, and I think the figure looks much better with this weapon.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
The Hoth Rebel Soldier is a very significant action figure because it represents the first Rebel army builder in the entire range. The first Star Wars film failed to offer us any troop builder characters. There were no Rebel fleet soldiers and no Rebel pilots outside of X-Wing Luke, making the Hoth Rebel Soldier a long overdue addition to the line. The figure is armed with what collectors call today the Bespin Blaster, and this accessory was used extensively throughout the Empire Strikes Back production run. In 1981, Kenner introduced a mail-away offer for an action figure survival kit that came with numerous weapons and accessories, including the Hoth Rebel backpack. I loved this item in childhood, as it allowed me to change up the look of my soldiers and add some visual variety to my squad of rebels. Sticking with the Hoth theme, we have the medical droid FX7. This droid appeared briefly in the scene where Luke is recovering from his Wampa wounds in the Bacta tank at Echo Base, and Kenner poured a tremendous amount of effort into this character, despite FX7's limited screen time. The droid has a tall body with a rotating head and extending neck, along with a mechanical arm that FX7 uses in the film to deliver medicine to Luke Skywalker. The lower half of the droid's body is surrounded by another 8 limbs, and Kenner produced these in a flexible PVC material. The limbs can all clip into the lower torso, and a child could extend each one individually to simulate the droid performing a medical procedure.
Master Luke, sir, it's so good to see you fully functional again.
After the rebels flee the ice planet Hoth, they are hotly pursued by the Empire, and Darth Vader enlists the services of a number of bounty hunters. In this brief scene we get our first live-action glimpse of the legendary Boba Fett, with that figure being the final character to appear on the original Star Wars cardback design. Yet there were 5 other unique-looking bounty hunters that also appeared in that scene, and Kenner delivered 2 of them in 1980. The reptilian alien Bosk is a fan favourite action figure who wears a yellow spacesuit, and he comes armed with a unique blaster rifle accessory that was never issued to any other figure. The spacesuit worn by Bosk was actually repurposed from a costume worn by a background character in the Mos Eisley Cantina in the first Star Wars film. Yet this wasn't the first time the costume was reused, with it also appearing in a low-budget science fiction film from 1964 titled First Men on the Moon, as well as in a classic 1966 episode of Doctor Who. IG-88 is an assassin droid who remains one of the taller action figures in the Kenner range, and he is also the first figure to come armed with 2 blasters. These include the standard Imperial blaster, as well as a new laser rifle, with both of these weapons being moulded in blue plastic. At the time when Kenner was creating this action figure, they had no reference photography showing them what the back of the character looked like, so the resulting sculpt can best be described as an artist's interpretation, and I think they did a very fine job. Rounding out the first wave of Empire Strikes Back action figures, we have 2 characters from Cloud City.
Bespin, it's pretty far, but I think we can make it.
The Bespin security guard from 1980 would go on to be joined by another guard that was released 2 years later, so collectors now refer to the original figure as Bespin Guard A. This character wears a navy blue uniform and he comes armed with the Bespin blaster. This entry also has a notable variation, as the figure comes with 2 different styles of moustache, both of which always reminded me of Charles Bronson.
Hello, what have we here?
The action figure interpretation of the smooth-talking Lando Calrissian character comes with a grey vinyl cape and a Bespin blaster, and there are 2 different versions of the figure that collectors seek out today. The first release figure doesn't have white paint on his eyes or teeth, while the second version does, and I like to call the later release figure the Colt 45 version.
Well, at least I can still say to her, how about a nice, cool, smooth Colt 45?
Hi. How about a nice, cool, smooth Colt 45?
Colt 45. Every time.
Interestingly, while the first version has no white paint at all, and the second version has white paint on the eyes and teeth, this early pre-production image suggests that the white additions were in Kenner's plans for this figure from the get-go. We've now covered the first 10 Empire Strikes Back action figures released in 1980. Yet there was one other character released that year that never appeared in any of the advertising.
Now all I gotta do is find this Yoda. If he even exists.
Kenner kept the Yoda character out of their original Empire Strikes Back marketing material at the behest of Lucasfilm, because George Lucas wanted to keep the character's appearance as a surprise, and this was a wise choice.
Away put your weapon, I mean you no harm.
Yoda is a wonderfully designed little action figure, and Kenner gave him more accessories than we had ever received before with any other figure. Perhaps they were trying to pack in more value, since the figure is so small. Yoda came with a soft goods robe, a belt, a walking cane and a snake. And by the time the Kenner Star Wars line ended in 1985, only one other figure would come with this many accessories, and that was Endor Leia.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Yoda is beautifully sculpted, and it's easy to see just how much care, attention and effort the designers poured into this action figure, making it one of the best in the entire line. The earliest issue figures came with light green skin, a light brown walking cane and an orange snake. Yet as the line continued, Yoda's skin became darker, the snake went from orange to brown, and his walking cane ended up almost cherry in colour. This darker skinned brown snake version is considerably rarer than the early release, and collectors should expect to pay a premium if they want to add this version to their collection. If you include Yoda in the 1981 action figure lineup, which many collectors do, we have another 10 entries released that year, with 4 of them coming from the planet Hoth, and they are 2-1B, the AT-AT driver, Hoth Leia and the Rebel Commander. The droid 2-1B finally joins his medical colleague FX7, and this action figure has a very interesting design that features a translucent torso and a respirator hose that plugs into the figure and runs from his hip to his mouth. He also comes with a unique medical accessory, and the design of his lower legs was invented by Kenner, because at the time of his development, they only had access to images of the droid from the waist up. The AT-AT driver has an excellent sculpt, and he was a very welcome army builder addition to our Imperial ranks. The figure comes with a laser rifle that features a sling, and just like the Stormtrooper and Snowtrooper that came before him, he has no neck articulation, due to his helmet and torso being sculpted into one piece. Hoth Leia comes with the same blaster as her previous 2 action figures, with this weapon now becoming one of the most expensive vintage Star Wars accessories to purchase on the second-hand market.
I don't know where you get your delusions, laser brain.
The introduction of this action figure meant that we now had 2 of the 3 main heroes in their Hoth costumes. Yet Luke Skywalker was still conspicuously absent from the trio, so most kids, myself included, just used the Rebel Soldier as our stand-in Hoth Luke. Completing the quartet of Hoth action figures from 1981, we have Cliff from Cheers.
If you take your average whale's intestines and stretch them out, you're looking at 3 miles and change.
The Rebel Commander has a very detailed face, and this figure is a great example of just how much Kenner's sculpting had improved over the previous few years. The action figure comes with a slinged rifle, which is quite challenging to get into his hand, and his backpack is moulded into the torso, so there's little opportunity here to customise the figure like we did with our Rebel soldiers and survival kit backpacks. I must admit that I have a bit of a soft spot for the Rebel Soldier and the Rebel Commander, because they represent the army guys who are fighting on the front lines of this galactic war. 1981 would see the introduction of a 4th bounty hunter, Dengar, and this short stocky character comes with a gigantic blaster, and he wears a dirty nappy on his head. Dengar also has his backpack sculpted straight into the torso. However, his pack is much larger than the Rebel Commander's, which makes it much more difficult to have him sitting in a vehicle.
Bounty hunters. We don't need that scum.
Yes, sir.
The Imperial Commander was sold on a card back that featured a photograph of General Veers, despite the figure's uniform being completely the wrong colour. In fact, the black Imperial officer costume was actually seen more frequently in the original Star Wars film, Yet I always felt the generic nature of this design meant he could stand in for any Imperial officer you wanted him to be. Returning to Cloud City, we get 3 more Bespin themed characters. When I was a child, it seemed that no one ever wanted the Lobot action figure, with his bald head and questionable fashion choices. But later in life I realised that I'd kinda turned into Lobot. This action figure comes with the now ubiquitous Bespin blaster, and the permanently attached computer interface is sculpted into his head. Lobot's Cloud City co-worker the Ugnaught was also released in 1981, and this figure comes with a soft goods apron which was produced in several different colours, and the most exciting accessory ever issued to a Star Wars action figure: a handbag.
The ship's almost finished. 2 or 3 more things and we're in great shape.
Bespin Han Solo has one of the more notable cock-ups in the line, as Kenner chose to give him a Bespin blaster accessory instead of his trademark DL-44 sidearm. But all is not lost. When I swap out Bespin Luke's yellow lightsaber for a blue one, it just looks wrong. I guess I've become so accustomed to seeing Luke with a yellow lightsaber that my brain can't handle seeing him wield any other colour. Yet I don't have the same reaction when I swap out Bespin Han's blaster, and I think the figure looks much better when he's carrying his trusty DL-44. For the 3rd and final year of Kenner's Empire Strikes Back run, the company offered up 9 more action figures. Sensorscope R2-D2 was almost the same as the first release figure. However, this time the droid has a pop-up scope play feature. That was inspired by the scene on Hoth, where R2 scans for signs of a missing Luke Skywalker. Perhaps this is why Kenner didn't release Hoth Luke until 1982, because we didn't have the damn sensorscope that we needed to find him.
Hey, steady girl. Hey, what's the matter? You smell something?
When I finally got the Hoth Luke Skywalker figure in childhood, he was one of the most disappointing Kenner Star Wars figures I had received up to that point. The figure had a bizarre sideways lean, a gormless looking face, and he came with a laser rifle that he couldn't hold and that he never used in the film. To make matters worse, Kenner failed to issue him with a lightsaber accessory, even though he has the most ideally sculpted saber grip in the range. This meant that the action figure of Hoth Han couldn't save Luke's life by slitting open the belly of the Tauntaun, but it wouldn't matter anyway, because without a lightsaber, Luke never would have survived his encounter with the Wampa. Where the Imperial Commander figure didn't look anything like the General Veers that appeared on the card back, the AT-AT Commander is directly copied from the uniform that this character was wearing when he took command of the lead Imperial Walker at the Battle of Hoth. Yet there isn't a photo of the actor on the card back. We instead have an image of 2 AT-ATs trundling across the snow. But this definitely is General Veers, and the figure was even called that on some very rare Canadian packaging. The AT-AT Commander was quite nicely sculpted. However, Kenner have again issued a figure with a Bespin blaster, instead of what would have been a more accurate Imperial blaster. Man, Kenner really had a hard-on for the Bespin blaster during their Empire run. In 1982 we would finally be able to complete the set of the 6 bounty hunters, as Kenner released the last 2 characters, Forlom and Zuckuss. The toy company infamously got the names of these characters mixed up, but none of us knew this until 1989, when the names were corrected in the West End Games Galaxy Guide 3 book. This has now become a really annoying little bit of trivia that Star Wars know-it-alls love to flex and throw out every chance they get. Like those obnoxious fans that try to tell people there's both a correct and an incorrect way to pronounce AT-AT. I don't care if you say AT-AT or AT-AT or Imperial Walker. It just grinds my gears when these losers act like you're committing a cardinal sin when you mention the incorrect name of an action figure that was released over 40 years ago.
His mama named him Clay, I'ma call him Clay. That's right.
Everyone called this figure Forlom for the first 7 years of his existence, until it was changed by a book that most of these tryhards never actually fucking read. So I have one thing to say to those idiots. They can all zuck ass. Now that we've got that out of the way, we can at last turn our attention to these 2 excellent action figures. When you compare Forlom and Zuckuss to some of the earlier Cantina aliens from 1979, you can see just how much better Kenner's figure designs were getting. The differences in sculpting, paintwork and accessories are so stark in contrast, it's almost hard to believe that these improvements were developed in just 3 short years.
There will be a substantial reward for the one who finds the Millennium Falcon.
4-LOM has a newly tooled blaster rifle that was never issued to any other figure, and he comes with a scaled down and nicely tailored coat, as well as strap-on chest armour. Zuckuss, on the other hand, has a really intricately detailed sculpt, and he comes with a unique weapon accessory that Kenner never again used in the line. Bolstering the ranks of your Imperial Army builders, Kenner finally introduced the TIE Fighter pilot in 1982, and their addition to the range was long overdue, since these pilots first appeared in the 1977 Star Wars film. In fact, the TIE Fighter pilots make multiple appearances during the Death Star battle in the original movie. Yet despite several TIE Fighter ships being shown on screen in The Empire Strikes Back, the only pilot to make a cameo in the film appears in this blink and you'll miss it moment when his body is flung from a downed TIE Fighter after it collides with an asteroid.
I'm going in closer to one of the big ones.
Closer?
Kenner's Imperial TIE Fighter pilot has been sculpted with a stocky build and an overly wide stance, and he comes with a new weapon accessory that looks more like a cordless drill than a Star Wars blaster. The figure also struggles to hold this accessory due to his hand being far too small to wrap around the pistol grip. This action figure has 4 Tampo printed Imperial symbols, with 1 positioned on each shoulder and 2 more on the helmet. And if you want to add a minty example of this character to your collection, you'll want to ensure these logos are intact. The final 3 figures to be added to Kenner's Empire Strikes Back range are all characters from Cloud City. Bespin Security Guard B has a bit of a funky stance, but I am pleased with his inclusion here, as he adds some welcome diversity to the roster of background characters. Just like the original Security Guard released in 1980, this action figure has a gold trim painted onto his tunic, and this can easily rub off, so it's something to be cautious of when collecting loose examples. The Cloud Car pilot is way cooler than he has any right to be, given the fact that we never get a close-up look at these characters in the film.
Rather touchy, aren't they?
This action figure has a superb overall design, and he comes with 2 accessories, including a blaster and a comlink, and he can comfortably grip both of them. Kenner even sculpted his left arm with a deliberate bend at the elbow, so the figure can hold the comlink close to his mouth when he wants to send a message to Bespin. If you own the Cloud Car vehicle, you'll want to add 2 of these action figures to your collection, so you can fill both cockpit seats. And I recommend saving yourself some money by acquiring a second loose figure with no accessories, as that blasted comlink really drives up the price of these vintage figures, and you can't see the accessories when they're piloting the Cloud Car anyway. The concept of a C-3PO droid with removable limbs was a genius idea that added a tremendous amount of play value to the figure.
Well, at least you're still in one piece. But what happened to me?
This is the version of 3PO that I owned in childhood, and when assembled the figure looks identical to the original version. Yet each of his 4 limbs can be unplugged from the torso, and Chewie can carry him to safety with the included backpack accessory. The Empire Strikes Back range is my favourite subset of vintage Kenner Star Wars action figures. Not just because they're based on the best film in the original trilogy, but because the line went really deep, offering us multiple versions of the main heroes, as well as a fantastic cast of background characters and army builders. They're also vastly superior to the figures from the original movie, both in terms of design and playability.
Adventure. Excitement. Jedi craves not these things.
But children and toy collectors do, and Kenner's Empire Strikes Back line delivered that in spades.
Now you can help the rebels defend Hoth with your own snowspeeder.
Rebel base, we're on our way.
Blast the droid on turret and probot.
We got it, Chewie.
And help Princess Leia and her friends escape from the Imperial attack base.
That was close. Let's get out of here. Don't let the rebels escape, Commander.
To be continued at your house with your own Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back minifigures and playsets.